The air in the reading room of the Royal Geographical Society was thick with the scent of old paper, polished wood, and unspoken ambition. For Dr. Alara Vance, it was the smell of home. Yet today, the familiar aroma did little to calm the frantic flutter in her chest. Before her, spread across the vast oak table like a confession, was her life's work, a series of intricate maps detailing the known river systems of the Amazon basin, and one, starkly empty section labeled Regio Inexplorata. Alara's fingers, usually steady as a surgeon's, trembled slightly as she traced the void. It was a cartographer's sin, a blank space on the map of the world in the year 1898. It whispered of forgotten tribes, undiscovered flora, and creatures that defied classification. It was a challenge, and she had staked her reputation on answering it. Dr. Vance. The voice, dry and authoritative, cut through her reverie. Sir Reginald Thorne, president of the society, stood at the head of the table, flanked by a committee of men whose faces were etched with the lines of long-held skepticism. Your proposal is audacious. The truth of the map often lies in its empty spaces, Sir Reginald. Alara replied, her voice clearer and more confident than she felt. The Mist River, as the indigenous tales call it, is the last great hydrological mystery of the continent. Its charting is not merely audacious, it is necessary. A murmur rippled through the room. An elderly member with a spectacular white mustache cleared his throat. A necessity best left to men with the constitution for it, my dear. The Amazon is not the Thames. It is a green hell. Fever, predators, hostile natives, it is no place for a woman. The old, familiar heat of frustration rose in her cheeks. She had heard it all before. My dear. A woman's delicate sensibilities. The impropriety. She had spent a decade proving herself, first as her father's assistant, then as a scholar in her own right, publishing papers under her initials to mask her gender. Now, she would no longer hide. With respect, Lord Hemsworth, she said, meeting his gaze squarely, my constitution has been tested in the Scottish Highlands, the Andes, and the libraries of this very society. I possess a doctorate in cartography, fluency in Portuguese and Tupi-Guarani, and a more comprehensive understanding of Amazonian hydrology than any man in this room. She let the bold statement hang in the air before continuing. The tales speak of a river that flows white as milk, water that does not mix with the darker currents of the surrounding tributaries. A geological and botanical anomaly. The Society's motto is plus ultra, further beyond. I propose we live by it. Sir Reginald steepled his fingers. And your guide? Carvalho is the best, but he is also difficult. A man of few words and many scars. He has refused every expedition for the past 3 years. He has agreed to meet with me, Alara said, a feat she knew had raised eyebrows from London to Manaus. I leave for Brazil in a fortnight. The decision, when it came, was a tense, split vote, but the promise of a final, glorious entry into the annals of exploration, of filling that last blank space, won out. Alara Vance had her commission. As she walked out of the hallowed halls into the damp London evening, the weight of the victory settled on her shoulders not as a triumph, but as a burden. She had gotten what she wanted. Now, she had to survive it. The heat of Manaus was a physical assault. It rolled off the wide, brown expanse of the Rio Negro in visible waves, thick and humid, carrying the cacophony of 1,000 unseen insects and the cloying sweetness of rotting vegetation. The city itself was a bizarre jewel of European ambition set in a wild, untamed crown. The opulent Amazon Theater, with its pink dome and Carrara marble, stood in stark contrast to the ramshackle docks and the relentless jungle that pressed in on all sides. Alara, dressed in a practical but still stifling khaki expedition suit, stood on the veranda of a riverside hotel, her maps spread before her. She was recalibrating her theodolite when a shadow fell over her papers. She looked up into the face of a man who could only be Mateus Carvalho. He was taller than she had expected, lean and wiry, with the ropey muscle of a puma. His skin was tanned to the color of teak, and a fine web of lines around his eyes spoke of a lifetime squinting against the sun. Those eyes were the most striking feature, a deep, liquid brown, but holding a flat, weary cynicism that seemed to absorb the light around them. He wore a faded linen shirt, leather breeches, and a well-worn knife hung from his belt. The scent of tobacco, river water, and something wild and earthy clung to him. "Senora de Tora," he said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't offer a hand. His gaze swept over her instruments, her maps, and finally, dismissively, over her person.
Senhor Carvalho, Elara replied, switching to fluent Portuguese.
"I am grateful you agreed to take on this expedition." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I agreed to a meeting, not an expedition." He gestured with his chin towards her equipment. "You bring a lot of toys. The jungle eats toys. It eats compasses. It eats hope." His eyes met hers, and the challenge in them was unmistakable. "It especially eats those who are not prepared." "I am prepared," Elara said, her spine straightening. "You have maps," he countered, tapping a blunt finger on her prized chart of the Rio Negro. "I have the river in my blood. They're not the same thing. Why do you want to find this?"
Rio da Névoa.
"For a line on a paper? For a title from old men in London?" "For knowledge," she said, her determination hardening under his scorn. "For the truth. The truth out there is that things live and things die. Mostly they die." He lit a thin, hand-rolled cigarillo, the smoke a pale ghost in the heavy air. "The Mist River is a story for Ribaranjos to tell their children. It is a fool's quest." "Then why are you here, Senor Carvalho?" Elara asked, her patience fraying. "If you believe it to be a fool's quest, why did you not refuse outright?" A complex emotion flickered in the depths of his jaded eyes, a flash of old pain, quickly suppressed. He looked past her, towards the endless, impenetrable green. "Maybe I am a fool," he said quietly. "Or maybe I am just tired of watching sensible people. My price is double what was offered. And you follow my lead, without question. On the river, my word is law. If you argue, if you hesitate, you will die. And you will likely get me killed with you. Do you understand?" It was not a question of agreement, but of submission. Elara felt a hot spike of rebellion. She was the leader of this expedition, the one with the Royal Society's commission. But she also saw the absolute, unshakable certainty in his face. He was not boasting, he was stating a fact. She took a deep breath, the humid air filling her lungs like water. "I understand the chain of command for survival, Senor Carvalho. But do not mistake my compliance for a lack of ability. I am here to map the river. You are here to ensure I live to do it." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It did not reach his eyes. "We will see, de Tora. We leave at dawn. Pack only what you can carry on your back when the boat can go no further. And lose the dress. The jungle has no respect for propriety." The first week on the river was a lesson in sublime intimidation. They traveled in a sturdy, shallow draft launch, its puttering engine a feeble noise against the jungle's vast symphony. Carvalho was a silent presence at the helm, his eyes constantly scanning the water and the tangled wall of vegetation on either bank. The crew consisted of 4 local men, stoic, efficient Ribaranjos who respected Carvalho with a quiet, almost fearful deference. Elara spent her days charting their course, taking soundings, and annotating her maps with observations on the shifting riverbanks. The beauty was breathtaking. Flocks of macaws painted the sky in flashes of scarlet and blue. Capuchin monkeys shrieked from the canopy, and the air hummed with life. But the menace was ever present. A caiman, log-like and still, sunned itself on a mud bank. Piranhas swarmed in the murky waters. At night, the darkness was absolute, a solid thing broken only by the glowing eyes of spiders and the haunting cries of howler monkeys that sounded like demons being torn apart. Carvalho spoke only when necessary. "Current shifts there, sandbar. Or do not touch that vine. It burns." His guidance was terse, practical, and always correct. The tension between them was a tangible thing. He watched her, waiting for her to break, for the first sign of feminine weakness. Alara, in turn, buried her fear and fatigue in a mask of stoic competence. She did not complain about the insects that feasted on her skin, the relentless humidity that ruined her paper, or the strange, unsettling feeling of being watched. The turning point came on the 10th day. They had left the main channel of the Rio Negro and entered a smaller, blackwater tributary Carvalho called the Rio de Serpente. The water was so dark it looked like oil, reflecting the oppressive canopy above. The engine coughed and sputtered, finally dying with a final, pathetic wheeze. "Silt in the fuel line," one of the crewmen muttered. Carvalho grunted, already moving. "We clear it. We are behind schedule." As the men worked on the engine, Alara decided to take a small skiff to map the next bend in the river, just a few hundred yards ahead. She was eager to be useful, to prove her initiative. "Do not go far," Carvalho warned, his head buried in the engine compartment. "The Serpent is misnamed. It is not lazy." She nodded, but his words felt like another attempt to constrain her. She rowed the skiff around the bend, and the world changed. The jungle closed in, the trees leaning over the river as if to swallow it. The light grew dim, filtered through a thick emerald gauze. The silence was profound, broken only by the drip of water from leaves. She was sketching the unusual rock formation on the bank when she felt it, a subtle shift in the current, a deep, powerful movement beneath the dark water. She looked down and saw a shape, vast and sinuous, gliding just beneath her small boat. It was longer than the skiff, its skin a mottled pattern of brown and black. Anaconda. Her blood ran cold. She had read about them, of course. But the books did not convey the primal terror of its silent, immense presence. She froze, her paddle hovering over the water. A low whistle cut through the silence from behind her. It was Carvalho, standing on the bank, having followed her silently. He made no sudden movements. He met her terrified gaze and gave a single, sharp shake of his head. "Don't move." He began to speak, not to her, but in a low, rhythmic chant in a language she didn't recognize. It was an old, guttural tongue, a sound that seemed to belong to the river itself. He moved slowly along the bank, parallel to the snake, his eyes locked on it. He broke off a large branch from a samalma tree and gently trailed its leaves in the water, creating a soft, distracting ripple. The massive snake paused, its head, the size of a small dog, breaking the surface for a moment. It seemed to consider Carvalho, the strange sound, the new vibration. Then, with an effortless, terrifying grace, it changed its course, sliding away from the skiff and disappearing into the deep, dark water downstream. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The jungle sound slowly returned. Alara's heart was hammering against her ribs so violently she felt sick. Carvalho walked to the water's edge. His face was grim. "I said not to go far." Shame, hot and acute, washed over her. She had been arrogant. She had nearly died. I thought. "You thought you knew better," he finished for her, his voice flat. But the outright scorn was gone, replaced by something else, a weary resignation. "Out here, thinking gets you killed. Feeling, listening, that keeps you alive." He held out a hand to help her from the skiff. "You're lucky it was not hungry. Only curious." Her hand was trembling as she took his. His grip was like iron, calloused and strong. For the first time, she saw not just a jaded guide, but a man who possessed a deep, instinctual symbiosis with this deadly world. He had not fought the snake. He had negotiated with it. "What was that you were saying?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "An old song. My mother's people. It asks for safe passage. It does not always work." He released her hand.
Come.
"The engine is fixed, and we have lost the light." As they walked back to the launch, Alara saw him in a new light. His cynicism wasn't just a personality trait, It was a scar tissue formed over countless brushes with death, a necessary callus to survive in a place that offered no second chances. And for the first time, he had looked at her not with doubt, but with a flicker of something that might have been the beginning of respect. The incident on the Rio de Serpente fractured the dynamic of the expedition. The wall of professional hostility between Alara and Carvalho began to crumble, replaced by a cautious, pragmatic alliance. She stopped trying to prove her theoretical knowledge and started to learn his silent language, the meaning behind a bird's sudden flight, the significance of a particular type of moss on a tree, the subtle warning in the change of the wind. He, in turn, began to offer information instead of just commands. He showed her how to find fresh water in a vine, which ants could be eaten for protein, and how to read the stars through the breaks in the canopy. He spoke of the jungle not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a capricious god to be appeased. One evening, as they sat by a fire, the flames pushing back the immense darkness, Alara dared to ask the question that had been burning in her since Manaus. "What happened? Why did you stop guiding expeditions?" Carvalho was silent for so long she thought he would ignore her. He stared into the fire, the flames dancing in his dark eyes. "I let a man like you," he said finally, "an Englishman, a botanist from Kew Gardens. He was searching for a rare orchid, the ghost orchid he called it. He had a drawing. He had funding. He had conviction." He poked the fire with a stick. He also had arrogance. He would not listen. He saw the jungle as his laboratory. He saw me as his servant. Carvalho's jaw tightened. We were close. I knew the area where the flower was said to bloom. But we were being watched by the Povo de Chuva, the Rain People, a tribe that does not welcome outsiders. I told him we must turn back. I felt their eyes. He called me a superstitious native, said I was inventing excuses to extort more money. Alara listened, her breath held. He went off the trail alone one morning. I found his pack trampled, his compass smashed. There was no blood, no body. The Povo de Chuva do not leave bodies. They simply take people. They become part of the forest. He looked up at her, the full weight of his guilt and grief naked in his gaze. I searched for 2 weeks. The jungle gave me nothing back. I brought his empty pack to Manaus. I wrote a letter to his wife in London. After that, I was done. Every fool who wants to find a flower or draw a line on a map, I see his face. The confession hung in the fire-lit air between them. Alara understood now. His doubt in her abilities was not about her gender. It was a trauma, a shield against being responsible for another life lost to the green maw of the Amazon. "I am not him," she said softly. He looked at her, truly looked at her, seeing past the expedition leader, the cartographer, to the determined, frightened woman beneath. "No," he conceded, his voice rough. "You are not. You are harder-headed. And you listen. Sometimes." A small, genuine smile touched her lips for the first time in weeks. "I am trying." From that night, their relationship deepened into a partnership. He began to appreciate the sharp, analytical quality of her mind, the way she could correlate his experiential knowledge with her scientific data. She, in turn, was in awe of his profound, almost spiritual connection to the land. The attraction that had been a faint, ignored hum in the background now grew into a palpable current. It was in the brief, steadying touch of his hand on her arm as she navigated a slippery riverbank, in the way their eyes would meet across the campfire, sharing a silent understanding of the day's dangers and small victories. They had been on the river for over a month. The known world was a distant memory. Carvalho's navigation became more intuitive, less reliant on the maps and more on a deep, internal sense of direction. The air grew thicker, cooler. A persistent, low-hanging mist began to cling to the water and the trees, muting sounds and distorting shapes. "We are close," Carvalho said one morning, his voice hushed. "The air smells different. The water, taste it." Alara cupped her hands and drank from the river. It had a distinct, chalky, mineral taste.
Lime.
Calcium carbonate. He nodded. The stories say the Mist River runs over a mountain of white stone. Later that day, they found the first canoe. It was old, carved from a single trunk of ironwood, and pulled high onto the bank. It was empty, but not abandoned. In it were offerings, polished stones, bright feathers, and a small, intricately woven basket containing dried herbs. "The Povo de Chuva," Carvalho whispered, his body tense. "This is their border. We are in their lands now." A profound silence fell over the group. Even the jungle seemed to be holding its breath. The sense of being watched was no longer a feeling, it was a certainty. Shadows flitted between the trees, just at the edge of vision. They made camp that night on a high bank, the mood somber. Carvalho posted a double watch. Alara lay in her hammock, listening to the night, her hand resting on the cool metal of her surveying compass. She was on the cusp of her goal, but the price of discovery now felt terrifyingly real. The attack came just before dawn. It was not with shouts or war cries, but with a whisper, a silent, ghostly onslaught. One moment, the guard was there, the next, he was gone, vanished into the mist. The second guard cried out a short, choked gurgle. Alara was jolted awake by Carvalho's hand over her mouth. His eyes were wide and urgent in the gloom. "Stay down," he breathed. Dark figures emerged from a mist, their bodies painted with intricate black and white patterns that made them seem like extensions of the night itself. They moved with an unnerving, fluid grace, surrounding the camp. Their arrows were nocked, the points blackened with poison. One of the crewmen panicked, raising his rifle. An arrow sank into his shoulder with a sickening thud. He screamed, a sound that was cut short as he collapsed, his body seizing. "Do not fight," Carvalho commanded, stepping forward, his hands open and raised. He began to speak, the same ancient, guttural language he had used with the anaconda. He spoke slowly, respectfully, gesturing towards Alara, then towards the river ahead. A tribesman, older than the others, his face a mask of severe lines and wisdom, stepped forward. He ignored Carvalho and walked directly towards Alara. She forced herself to stand her ground, her heart pounding in her throat. He was tall, powerfully built, and his eyes held an intelligence that was both ancient and sharp. He looked at her maps, which she had hastily rolled, then at her theodolite. He reached out a hand and touched the brass instrument, then her face, tracing the line of her jaw with a rough finger. He said something to Carvalho, his voice like the rustling of leaves. "He says you have the eyes of the river," Carvalho translated, his voice tight with tension. "He says you carry this seeing stone. He wants to know why you are here." "Tell him we seek the White River," Alara said, her voice surprisingly steady. "We seek only to see it, to understand it. We mean no harm to his people." Carvalho relayed the message. The old shaman listened, his expression unreadable. He pointed to Alara's compass, then to the river ahead. He spoke again a long, flowing sentence. "He says the river you seek is sacred. It is the milk of the Earth Mother. It gives his people life and takes their dead. He says you may look, but you may not take. And you—" Carvalho looked at Alara, a strange awe in his eyes. "You must go alone with him. He will show you the way. The rest of us must stay." It was a leap of faith more terrifying than any anaconda. To go alone, unarmed, with this powerful, unknown figure into the heart of the unknown. Alara looked at Carvalho. In his eyes, she saw no more doubt, only a fierce, protective fear and a profound respect. He gave a single grim nod. The decision was hers. She met the shaman's gaze. "I will go." The shaman, whose name was Erua, led Alara on a path invisible to her eyes. They walked for hours, the mist growing so thick it was like walking through cloud. The jungle sounds faded, replaced by a deep, resonant silence broken only by the drip of water and the sound of their own breathing. The air was cold and heavy with the taste of minerals. Then, through a final curtain of hanging vines and mist, she saw it. The Mist River. It was not a tale. It was a miracle. The river flowed from a vast, limestone cavern in a cliff face, wide and powerful. But the water was not dark. It was a milky, opaque turquoise white, so vibrant it seemed to glow with an internal light. It flowed into a wide, circular basin, its waters swirling but not mixing with the darker water of the tributary that fed from it, creating a stunning, bicolored spectacle. The entire area was shrouded in a gentle, warm mist that rose from the water's surface. The rocks lining the banks were pure white, covered in a soft, travertine deposit. Strange, phosphorescent fungi and orchids of impossible colors clung to the trees. It was the most beautiful, alien, and sacred place Alara had ever seen. Arawa gestured for her to approach the bank. He knelt, cupped the white water, and drank. He indicated for her to do the same. The water was clean, cold, and rich with minerals. He then pointed to the cavern from which the river emerged. He says that is where the world was born, Carvalho's voice said softly from behind her. She turned, startled. Arawa had allowed him to follow, staying a respectful distance back. And where it will be reborn. Alara's cartographer's mind was reeling. The geological anomaly was beyond anything she had imagined. A subterranean river, likely flowing through vast limestone deposits, leaching calcite and other minerals, creating this breathtaking phenomenon. But her scientist's heart was silenced by the sheer, overwhelming spirituality of the place. This was not just a river to be mapped, it was a cathedral. For hours, she worked under Arawa's watchful eye. She took measurements, sketched the basin, the cavern, the unique ecosystem. But she did not drive stakes into the ground or leave behind any mark of her own. She simply observed and recorded, with a reverence she had never felt for any subject before. As the sun began to break through the mist, casting the white water in an ethereal golden light, Arawa approached her. He pointed to her rolled maps, then to the river. He made a sweeping gesture, as if unrolling the map over the land, and then a cutting motion across his own throat.
Carvalho translated quietly.
He says the truth of this place is not for the paper of the white man. It is for the heart. If you put this on your map, others will come. They will dig. They will take the stones. They will spoil the water. The river will die, and his people will die with it. The map must remain empty. Alara looked from the shaman's fierce, pleading eyes to the impossible beauty of the Mist River. She thought of the Royal Society, of Sir Reginald, of the glory of being the one to fill the final blank space. She thought of the lines she had dreamed of inking onto the parchment. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that some truths are too sacred to be owned, too fragile to be discovered. She looked at Arawa and nodded. Then, she walked to the water's edge, unrolled the most detailed map of the region, the one that showed the void of the Regio Inexplorata. She weighted its corners with stones. And then, with a deliberate, steady hand, she took her charcoal pencil and, in the blank space, she did not draw a river. She drew a single, small, perfect circle. It was not a cartographical symbol. It was a promise, a secret, a tribute. Arawa watched her, and for the first time, his severe face softened into something akin to a smile. He nodded his approval. The journey back was a different kind of expedition. They were lighter, not just in supplies, but in spirit. The constant, oppressive fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, shared solemnity. The crewman who had been struck by the arrow survived, thanks to Carvalho's knowledge of antivenom plants and the tribe's decision to use a non-lethal toxin, a final warning. Alara and Carvalho spoke little of what had happened at the Mist River. It was a knowledge that lived between them, a bond that needed no words. The attraction that had simmered for weeks now bloomed fully in the quiet moments, a shared glance over the campfire, the brush of a hand as they portaged the canoe, the unspoken comfort they found in each other's presence during the long, star-filled nights. One evening, as they camped on the banks of the now familiar Rio Negro, the lights of Manaus a distant, hazy glow on the horizon, Carvalho broke the silence. "You did not map the river," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a question. I mapped it, Alara replied, looking out at the water. Just not on paper. I mapped it here. She touched her temple. And here. She placed a hand over her heart. Some places belong to the world, not to a kingdom or a society. They will call you a failure, he said. The men in London. Let them, she said, and was surprised to find that she meant it. I have seen something they will never comprehend. I have learned that a map is not just a record of what is there, but also a guardian of what should remain hidden. My quest was not for a line, but for an understanding. And I found it. He moved closer to her, the space between them electric. And what will you do now, Datora Alara Vance? Return to your reading room? Your polished wood and old paper? She looked at him, at the man who had doubted her, challenged her, saved her, and ultimately helped her find a truth greater than the one she had sought. She saw a future not in the stifling halls of London, but in the vast, wild, heartbreaking beauty of this land. With him. No, she said softly. I think my place is here. There are other empty spaces on the map, other secrets the jungle keeps, and I find I have a very capable guide. Mateus Carvalho looked at her for a long moment, the jaded cynicism in his eyes finally, completely, melting away, replaced by a warmth and a hope she had never seen there before. He reached out, his calloused hand gently cupping her face. Minha cartografa, he whispered. My cartographer. And as his lips met hers under the endless Amazonian sky, Alara knew that her greatest discovery had not been a river of mist and milk, but a love as deep and uncharted as the jungle itself. Her quest was over, but her journey had just begun.